Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Olena Berezovska, and I continue to do podcasts with amazing people, famous and not very famous, but smart, interesting, who can make your life brighter and also share the experience. And today I have special guest from DC, United States. And we're going to talk about happy inheritance and also well-being, family well-being. So I have two guests. It's Claudia Tordini and Richard Franklin. Welcome to my podcast. And we decided that Claudia and Richard will introduce each other because I don't want to miss any important information about them. So please, I don't know who the first one. Richard?
Well, okay, I'll go first. And so joining me today is Claudia Tordini, and she's originally an engineer by training, industrial engineer, and has always been interested in humanist psychology and sort of a people-oriented person. She came to the United States about 18 years ago and got an MBA from the Wharton School at University of Pennsylvania, and then a second master's from that school in executive coaching and organizational dynamics. And since about 2017, we've sort of been co-conspirators in applying sort of the intersection of positive psychology and well-being to estate planning and inheritance planning, and trying to, as Dr. Seligman says, make it an engine of well-being, which is totally foreign in the trust and estates world or inheritance world for the most part.
And as I know, as I know, Claudia had a winning project at University of Pennsylvania related to psychology, right? About what was the name of the project, if you don't mind?
I teach two courses at the University of Pennsylvania. One is about developing emotional intelligence, and the other one is about relational skills. And both use, I use art as a tool for the development of those skills.
Wonderful. Yeah. Now it's your turn to introduce Richard.
So Richard Franklin is here with me today. He is a trust and estate lawyer. He's been a lawyer for more than 30 years, working with particularly wealthy families in everything that has to do with inheritance planning. As he said, he's very well known in his world, but in a way we came together talking about inheritance that is so different in my country than what it is in the US, and so we kind of became curious about the different modalities. The idea that here parents don't have to leave anything to their children, whereas in my country, parents have to leave their money to their children and spouses. And so that, coupled with me focusing on learning, humanistic psychology and positive psychology, we came to, in a way, fuel each other's passions. In particular for Richard, I think it would be nice if you tell your story, how you came to be so interested into, positive psychology and family inheritance.
Well, I have traditionally, as Claudia said, represented very wealthy families, and with a focus on tax planning, and the tax planning being to minimize the transfer tax costs, the estate costs, the estate tax costs. In the United States, there's an estate tax and a gift tax and a generation skipping tax. So those taxes are very significant. And the majority of the people in my world, as lawyers dealing with trust and estate issues, focus their time on tax planning and maybe a little bit more on creditor protection planning, but not so much on the actual humans involved. You know, either the clients themselves or whoever they're benefiting, their children or, you know, more extended family members. And I have seen lots of sort of negative orientation to inheritance, and really had more of a vision that inheritance ought to be very positive. And so that's what I've really been focusing on over the last 5 or 6 years, is how to make it very positive, inspiring, and also helpful for the well-being of the beneficiaries. And
the whole family, even the parents.
And that's why you created the group. It calls, sorry, what the name of the group?
Appanage.
Appanage group.
Yes.
And I was surprised when I looked through the website of this group that I never seen before, that people would combine psychology, positive psychology, like you did with law. And I have my two best friends, actually, they're lawyers. One is business lawyer and almost retired, and another one was the best criminal lawyer in Ontario. and I know they're serious, and at the same time I see they always like think about clients in a positive way, how to make all these processes that people go, like the clients, positive, not so stressful. And now we are talking about wealth, family, like, you know, wealth of families, and then a positive inheritance, happy inheritance, which is something unique and new. And that's, I'm very surprised, because I know that you care about people. You want these people to have less negative emotions. And even when my lawyer says we need to create a will, and it's time for you to think about this and that, like, you know, it causes a lot of negative emotions.
Yeah.
And there's them how to write a will, how to think about like property and everything you have, and how to give it to your children with less headache for them, not for you, right? But I think many people are afraid to talk about inheritance, because mostly it's associated with negative emotions and negative thoughts. How is your approach? Like, how you talk to your clients, and what do you use from positive psychology in a way of creating legal documents that that future of generation depends on these documents, right? And their wealth and their well-being.
So the first thing, before we get to the documents, which, you know, Richard has developed what he calls a well-being trust, and other tools that we have developed, the first step is demystifying, you know, a lot of the ideas around money, around wealth, that actually are not fundamented, are unfundamented. They are not based on research. It's very anecdotal. Of course, we all know those outlier cases of the rich people that ended up very bad, but that is actually not the average or the majority. That's what gets the publicity. And there are, you know, several, actually, thankfully, there is now some new research that is proving that a lot of those ideas, you know, were wrong. But I would like to start by saying that back in late 1800s, Andrew Carnegie wrote a little paper that he called the Gospel of Wealth. He was obviously one of the most rich men at that time. And he wrote something, you know, saying that basically leaving money to your children was a shame, was the worst thing you could do for your children. It's, you rather curse them than leaving them money. He also said that, you know, a man should give all his wealth during lifetime. For him also, if, you know, dying with wealth was also a shame thing. And, you know, when you dig into the history, It has to do with, back at that time, what was happening, the whole context around wealthy men. He even said that, the wealthy men that were just a few, but very wealthy, they were the trustee of the universe. They were basically entrusted with this wealth because they were more knowledgeable or smarter or more powerful, compared to the rest. And that because they were entrusted, they had to give that back. That has totally to do with the political and economical context at that time. It also has to do with the fact that he had no children when he wrote this. And, unfortunately, that rooted in society, and it's what today, even today, more than 100 years after, the very wealthy men like Warren Buffett or Bill Gates are still building on that idea that you shouldn't leave money to your children because you're going to waste them. Now, thankfully, we have research that proves otherwise.
Well, we're not necessarily trying to address the billionaire class, but that idea that money could be harmful to children has filtered down, to the broader populace. And I'll just give you three, what I call myths that Claudia was referring to. One is the idea that shirt sleeves in 3 generations. And that's just sort of a popular idea that, you have the wealth creator generation, then the second, by the 3rd generation, it's all gone. But the data doesn't really support that. And at least what I consider the better data of it, really shows that wealth in families does stay over the long term. And there may be a regression to the mean, but it may take 10 to 15 generations before that actually happens. And and businesses, of course, family businesses may not last 100 years, but most public companies don't last 100 years either. That is, there's a life cycle to a business, but that the wealth these family businesses generate, typically does stay around in the family. So the wealth holder can really approach their wealth with the idea, my grandchildren's grandchildren are going to see this money, and it has the potential of being useful for their well-being. And you can think of it like the Norwegian sovereign wealth fund, preserving assets for future well-being. And then there's another one, a myth that, well, I'm going to call it a myth, but the data that surrounds happiness peaks at 75,000 of income, income and happiness, that data, there's a robust set of data that says there's an income threshold beyond which happiness does not increase. But there's a senior fellow at the Wharton School who recently did an adversarial collaboration with 2 other researchers, Angus Deaton from Princeton and his co-author, who's really with the co-author from, I think, the University of Michigan, where they really determined that threshold level of income that was found in prior research related to an unhappy cohort of people. For example, a depressed person, income up to a certain level is going to be helpful to them, right? That they have healthcare coverage, they can have food and shelter and so forth, but they're still going to be depressed, even after 100,000 of income. But for the more normalized, larger majority group of the population, this data set shows that the greater the income, the greater the happiness and subjective well-being, and that there's no income threshold. And in fact, for the happier people, the incline up is even graduated further for that happiest cohort. So when you break it down by that data down by happiness, there really is no income threshold for it. So families ought not to be concerned that they're, from that point of view, they're harming the person by giving them more. And then there's this idea, the third one what I call it's a myth, is that there's a concern that people will develop a sense of entitlement if they're, given too much, and that they won't be productive and engaged in society and, really achieve their full potential, right? Self-actualization and so forth. And when you go to really search for the data that supports that idea, it's not there. If you go search Google Scholar for, some social science data or science or, data from psychology, at least I can't find it. And so I think that the combination of all those things is that parents ought not to be overly concerned that their wealth is going to harm their descendants. I think the best data is completely the opposite. It's more the Killingsworth data that shows the more income, the greater the well-being. And then I think there's other persuasive information from the sort of first world countries that are more the Nordic model, where they have a strong social safety net that really is persuasive evidence that not being at risk and is better for one's well-being. In effect, that they're a data set, a study, in happiness. So the combination of all that, leading us that there is a way to use inheritance in a positive dynamic to help the humans involved have better well-being.
Yeah, and so in particular, we like to stress the idea that well-being is not just merely like the happy, easy life. As we know, well-being is a construct of basically all the domains in life. Yeah. And for you to flourish, for you to increase well-being, you have to be doing well in all of them, right? Or in many of them. And so we use that as a way to reassure parents that the focus on well-being is really to build a solid platform. It's not just, to make an easy life for your children. And that in a way guarantees that, the money is not going to waste them. On the contrary, it's going to help them, build a robust, life. So there's also research that supports otherwise, like if you're familiar with the U shape of happiness, where, a person, builds, up until more or less their 20s, and then it has a dip down, and it doesn't come back until like the 50s. And, it's not very clear why that happens. Certainly there's economic struggles, there's, a person starts a life, a position, a career, positioning themselves in society. I mean, it's natural struggles. But, we say, parents, why wouldn't you support your children with wealth during that time, And
I interrupt you, sorry. I think that we have data, we have some research where it says that by 40s, usually we start having wisdom, and especially through analytical thinking and logical thinking, because we have data that young generation, they have quite low level of analytical thinking at high school, and then we start getting knowledge and experience. And when we don't have wisdom, we just like, like we're just happy, like because we're young, right? Then we start analyzing, going like, learning the world, working hard. It's a different responsibility. And usually by 40s, the majority of people get this level when they kind of become wise, because they start using more productively analytical thinking. And then we have a different meaning of happiness. Before the happiness was like, some alcohol, some smoke, some pot, whatever, like some entertainment. Then by 40 plus, we have absolutely different meaning of life and the meaning of something important for us. And that probably the perception of happiness changed dramatically. And that's why we start feeling even more happier, even with less money, let's say, yeah, but we looking for something that meaningful for us, not just like entertainment or this kind of restless moments from our youth. And probably that's why we have this U shape of happiness and perception of life. And I think I don't know even any exclusion from this shape, like among people I know. I went through the same, right? So maybe that's why when we getting older, we start thinking wisely. But what is interesting that we getting older, we start thinking wisely. We start kind of like planning something, like planning like happy retirement, happy inheritance, happy everything, right? But our generation of our children is still in a process of development, in especially maturing, like
Yeah.
going
Yeah.
through maturation, right? Going through all this, like, families you're working with, do you see a huge difference now in modern society, especially American one, depending on culture, or let's say some religions or professions? Like, is there any difference, like when we're talking about family who preparing this inheritance for future generation or whatever they prepare? Like, if you can describe in a few words, what is actually this wealthy family now? Do we see the difference comparing to some other years or periods of?
I don't see a lot in the people that I work with currently, a lot of differences like that. I think the whole concept of positive psychology has come around, during the course of my career. So that's developed, and we have a better data sets around that to use in our practice.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that I talk about with virtually every client now is how the life expectancy of the affluent has developed so that people are living much longer, right?
Yeah.
For wealthier people. And that I've made the analogy to who was Prince Charles, now King Charles. I did call it the Prince Charles effect, but now the King Charles effect, with him waiting to inherit the throne. His mom died at 96 and he was 73 when he inherited the throne. And so if, the idea that is sort of a good analogy to inheritance, if you're waiting to inherit to the time your parents die, then you might be in your 70s, right?
Yeah.
And that sort of orienting the conversation more towards what if we shift some of that to during lifetime, and so that it would be available sooner in time to support their well-being earlier, so that they have better housing, they have better support for education, healthcare. And education and healthcare in the United States is not included, right? In Canada, be more included. And so the US is more of an outlier on those things among wealthy countries. So the cost of living in the United States is pretty dramatic. And it's pretty dramatic, the differences between people without access to good healthcare and those that do have it. And so some of and this is what we're talking about, is completely scalable. I think it's not just oriented to wealthy people, but parents who can give a few $100s more to go from the bronze plan to the silver plan, might make a real difference in somebody's life. And so that's a big thing. And people, it's not something that they get intuitively, and people really gravitate to the idea. And we've done that with so many different kinds of people who, I represent the rich aunt or uncle. And so the people that are giving to nieces and nephews that they plan to gift at death, I'm saying, well, you know what? It really might be more helpful to them now. What do you say if we just spread it out over 10 years, and tell them they were important in your life. You were planning to leave them, a gift at death. And but this is a better idea to do it now, so that they have, more resources now for their life. And that has been a real boon, I think, for people to, gravitate in that direction. So that's a very, significant change that I see. And and you can orient that spending toward things that increase well-being. And so it's not just for a new car, but what are, and in fact, that's one of our approaches that Claudia can talk about.
And what we see is, this is an industry that is very much, we call it risk management, it's the risk of losing the money, so there's all the wealth management from the financial perspective, or the risk of spoiling the children. So there's all the law, so that they don't get the money, and they can only get the money for this and for that. And so, but that's because that's what the industry, is used to. Sorry. But what we see is that for some parents, what they need is to hear the positive approach. Because all they get from the industry, from the financial managers, from the lawyers, from the accountants, is the risk management approach. Is don't this, don't that, don't this other one. And some of them, they really are welcoming that positive approach. And they are prone to, yes, I do want to support my children. Yes, I do love my children. At some point, there is an overlap between inheritance and love, you know, and, particularly in a family, where, you can't disassociate that.
Yes.
And so for those who are really loving and who really care for their children, I think they are very open to listen. Oh, there is a positive approach. Oh, yes, I want it. The problem is that the industry is not promoting it.
It's interesting because let's say if you see the client that has some negative emotions, some conflict with children or some other relatives, so these people are confused usually what they're going to do with their wealth. Should they leave to children, and they hear negative advices from other people? Oh, no, they didn't deserve it. Come on, like they not good. Maybe it's a time to improve this relationship. Maybe it's the time to spend like more time with children before they could be very busy with building the business, creating the wealth, right? And again, now even when they have grandchildren, it's another story. It's like also a new generation, right? And like I understand that nobody is approaching people in a way that let's see the situation now and how you're gonna, and remember that you might live long, yeah? So would you like to have a quality time with your family, and then to write a will and then give it as wealth to your family members or somebody you like? It would be much more easier without negative emotions and negative thoughts, and some kind of like a stone on your chest that you're doing something you're not feeling like well about.
Yeah. When we first started doing this, I sort of had an analogy to positive psychology itself. Wasn't trying to fix people, it was trying to take normalized people and make them better.
Yeah.
So most of the families that I deal with, the children are doing just fine, but how can we take those families that are doing well and make them better? And I think there certainly there are things that we can do to help in that regard, focus the parents more on their strengths, make sure they have the resources to develop their strengths, and be positive. Remove in the documents that you're referring to earlier, remove anything that's negative. Just focus on the positive.
Usually when somebody dies and the funeral, like in a funeral, we have a lot of people and they start talking nicely. But I usually think, okay, why I never seen these people before? Like why we were not gathering together before, and why now? And everybody says, oh, probably I should call this person who died, or maybe I should visit in a hospital, or maybe this, maybe that. The time is lost in some way, and it's sad that we kind of like talking about this person more during the funeral than before the funeral, making the life of this person better in a way that appreciate show our love, show our appreciation, show our support, right? And what you do, and you actually teach people, you coach people how to spend quality time in the process of planning your inheritance, like, passing to the generation of somebody else. And that's amazing. I'm telling you, it's what you're doing. It's really good, really good. I appreciate that you discuss this so openly, and bringing this topic to that people could know that there is positive psychology even in this, not just like you said, negative only about like writing will and that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So one of the things that, it's quite common is when parents have a child that is not pursuing a money-making career, say art, that always makes them very scary. Like, it's what is he or she gonna do? Is gonna be able to, make a living, and these are wealthy families, but they're still concerned. And so one of the things that we tell them is like, do you want your children to, so imagine your family in 10 or 15 years. Do you want your children to be making a lot of money, or you want them to be, following, pursuing their strengths and really developing what they are good at, and why not supporting a child who really has a passion and the strength towards, art, for example, or a sport, or a not financial, say, career, or not, traditionally money-making career. Why not, So it's, as I said, just, if you have the money to support them and supplement their income, what is the problem about that, and so we do ask, these type of questions to them. In fact, we develop what we call a family, well-being framework, which is exactly that, in a way is imagining how do you want to see your family and your family members in the long run, and how can you build over time, towards that direction. And, it's just, in many cases, it's just a little tweak to what they are doing today. Like, families spend a lot of money on big family vacations, for example. So how can you make sure that the family vacation is not just traveling together, but having, as you say, some more meaningful conversations, or maybe, exploring places or activities that are core to some of the family members' strengths, for example, or interests. And so it's just being a little bit more intentional about everything they do, make sure that it's in line to building well-being of the family.
Yeah. Thank you very much for this very important information and this wonderful conversation we have, because I think it's some kind of progress in law and in positive psychology to talk about, and even like combination of psychology with what you did with law, with these documents, like you said. Yeah, so it's a wonderful idea, and I think you're probably the pioneers in this area, because I never met such a meaningful approach. Because you have meaningful, like you're not just like, let's fill the documents and that's it. Meaningful approach makes your company and your team unique in the world, in North America. And I really appreciate that you're doing this, because even me, like when I was listening to you, I was start thinking, what do I do with my my property, my everything mine, if I would like to share with my kids before I die, or if I'm gonna like collect it, like increase and then And also, you see, I grew up in society, well, let's say generation when, like you said, everybody says you have to work very hard, and then create this wealth, and then actually don't spoil your children because you want to see them in different way, but they are not like you want them to see, something like that. And I have different approach. I said I created these children like with love, with pleasure. It was my desire and my husband's desire to have family, and I didn't want my children to suffer climbing their career or going through their life. I know sometimes the life is difficult, sometimes we lose everything, like we have health problem, but I don't want my children go in a hard way like I was taught. I want my children to go is the easiest way. Are they going to be spoiled, or I don't care actually. I want them to see happy and healthy and joyful and be satisfied with life, with everything they achieve. That's what I want to see, and I really don't care what other people are gonna say. That's for me important, and I probably came myself to this thought that no, I don't want my children to work very hard. Even they're working hard because it's their perception of life, it's their ideas, right? But I don't want them to suffer, especially when they need money the most, when they're going through some difficulties in life. I want them to have less problem that I had. And I'm immigrant too. I know what is to be without money, and I know what is like going like to the top of the ladder, right? But at the same time, and nobody could help me, but I'm glad that there are families, they actually see this relationship with the children in a way like quality way before they die, not like what's going to happen after I die and I don't care, or maybe they will be swearing and arguing about this, like my wealth. No, this is like not important when you die. But for children and for other people, like dearest people for you, it's important when you spend this time, quality time together, with joy and appreciation of each other. So what you're doing, you teach people to have this happy inheritance, like you said, well-being, and not when the main character is gone, but actually before that, together as a family, which I really appreciate. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us. Thank you so much for your
And
interview.
I'm sure we'll have another podcast or maybe some more podcasts, because the topic you like teaching, the subject of happy well-being and happy retirement, not retirement, sorry, inheritance, it's really important. So thank you very much again.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you
you.
so much, Elena.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.